Thanks everyone for joining us. And so kind of our session today that we're going to be focusing on is around the world Indigenous experiences. And so it's what we're going to do then is we're going to, first of all, start with some quick intros, and then we'll kind of just where people talk about who they are and kind of, you know, what organization they're part of. And then we'll rotate through one more time, and then people will kind of speak, you know, for say 7-8 minutes, whatever, in terms of the work that they do and their experiences around COVID. And then what we'll do is we'll have a facilitated discussion after that. And then if there's time, we'll obviously kind of you know, take questions from the attendants at the session. So thank you for that. My name's Steph McLaughlin. I'm a prof at the University of Manitoba here in Winnipeg, in Treaty 1 territories, and also the kind of the homeland of the Métis Nation. And so I'm a prof in environment, in environmental health and environmental justice. And so thanks for joining us today. Maybe I'll start off with Geraldine. I'll just read you through kind of the order that you appear on my screen. And so Geraldine, you're first. Okay. So if you could just introduce yourself and just kind of where you're located and just very quickly the kind of work that you do.
Okay. My name is Geraldine McManus. I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I had my camp on the border in between Canada and the United States, of which is actually international territory for the Dakota people. So I'm working on a camp to create the Injustice Environmental Education Center for people here in Manitoba and for the youth. That's where I'm at.
Perfect, thank you. Shavon, you're next on my screen.
Okay, my name is Shavon Sinclair, and I'm currently working out of the University of Manitoba on the digital app project. And I guess my role there is the community researcher. So I've been working alongside that project, but my previous experience is around health and basically working in First Nation communities. Miigwech.
Thank you. And then Sheri.
Velina Maikako, good morning from Hawaii. I'm Sheri Daniels. I'm the Executive Director of Papa'ola Lokahi, which is the Native Hawaiian Health Board, and we're responsible for the oversight of Native Hawaiian health for Native Hawaiians here in Hawaii, but as well as across the United States. And it's really great to be here this morning. Oh, and I live on Maui, by the way.
Thank you. Great. Okay, wonderful. So then if we can, maybe we'll go through the same order, and starting with Geraldine, you know, again, 7-8 minutes, whatever makes sense to you. Just talking a little bit about your kind of own experiences around COVID in terms of the communities that you work most closely with, I suppose.
Well, oh my goodness, I don't even know where to begin with that. But I basically work a lot on my own. I find that the Indigenous movement here is a little bit different than what it's like in the United States. So I think a lot of my work is has been from the beginning is just to create a larger movement. And I've been talking about that. I spoke a lot about that down at my camp, and trying to educate people into understanding the importance of us becoming more environmentally involved in regards to what's going on around Turtle Island. And I support all the other camps. I visit as many camps as I can. Something that I created out on the line, you know, initiated a camp up in Hollow Water, protecting their land. And, you know, also another camp started up for land reasons and overland issues over at Roseau River. And I think that just creating that new force that we're in very much need of something that I really think is really important, which is why Spirit of the Buffalo Camp and the creation of a new one with whole new model and bigger ideas for creating a larger force of environmentally active people is something that I'm focused on here in Manitoba. So I sit in my office here and I create as much as I can around that, and I work towards that goal. Because while I was out on the line in my wigwam, I was spiritually shown by the ancestors that was about Environmental Injustice Education Center. They wrote it on my wigwam in a vision, and I seen it. And I actually laughed about it because the side that they put it on was that wigwam was faced towards actual Enbridge. So literally right across the field as Enbridge workers were turning into their the Enbridge site, you can see my wigwam off in the distance. So the way I was showed it through my vision was that those letters were to be big and bright, so that every time someone, one of the workers turned into the Enbridge site, they would see what I wrote on the side of the wigwam. So that, however, didn't come to fruition because the wigwam got burned down. So I was never able to accomplish that, what they showed me. But so we're going to be, I'm working on getting it in a whole nother concept. And so the new camp is extremely important to me. It's going to be helped along with some other organizations that I sit on boards with here. And so that's kind of my main goal, is to kind of get this next camp up and running. And that's why I created Spirit of the Buffalo Screening Company, so that we have business that will be constantly helping to bring in resources for the camp. And I'm working on a lot of stuff around that as well, like I said, with some other organizations. So that's my main goal, is let's get the youth of tomorrow ready for what they have to continue for a lot of us environmental workers who are getting older. And so that's kind of my plan at the moment, and that's where I'm at.
So how, just really quickly, how did the pandemic affect those activities and all of those activist activities? Like, it
shut everything down. It literally shut everyone down. No one can congregate, no one can meet, and it eliminated us being able to do our work. For myself as well, I'm an elder in training, and a big part of a lot of the work that many of us in training are doing to be elders for the future is we have to meet with our elders. We have to go out and do specific things. Well, none of those things are possible right now. So they've put my entire education on hold, and that is extremely frustrating. I think putting elders in jeopardy, is a scary thing. And so, of course, everyone's being extremely careful because those elders are our future as well. So I think the pandemic, of course, as myself, as I was saying, I'm a bit of a controversial person. I've been called conspiracy theorist many times, and because I don't entirely believe in the reasoning behind what's going on around this pandemic. I'm not anti-vaxxer or vaccinator, or I'm not an anti-masker. I'm not any of those things. I put my mask on when I go go do my shopping, just to make people feel comfortable and not to upset anymore and cause any more anxiety than some people need. So, but it's, the vaccines, I'm very afraid of. I called it 4 days in advance. I said, you know what? I have a feeling they're going to vaccinate all the First Nations and the old people first. And 4 days later, it came out in an article that, yep, they said straight up, they're going to vaccinate First Nations people and old people first. Exactly what I called 4 days prior. And so my thoughts have always been, why would the government want to help Indigenous people now? Why do they want to vaccinate every Indigenous person now? Why? Because we're all standing up. You know what? I know it sounds absolutely crazy, and it's really way out there, but they've never cared about Indigenous people in Canada or United States. It's always been a land grab. It's always been about money. It's been about our natural resources. And this is why they continue to push the genocide on us in many different ways. And a lot of us indigenous people understand exactly how they're doing it. It's very blatant in some areas. So you know, if I don't entirely believe in what's going on, and I don't, and you know, if I don't want the vaccine, it's because the vaccine hasn't been tested on anyone. And so basically we're all the test subjects. And I think for myself, that makes me very uncomfortable. I'm not going to put something foreign into my body if I don't know entirely what's in there. You know, many times this happened throughout history. There's been, you know, where people were given certain things, and then you see, you know, years later, commercials come out and say, well, if you got this vaccination and you're having these symptoms, you know, you can get onto this, you know, lawsuit. So, you know, we've watched all of this happen. We've seen these kinds of things, you know, kind of go out and off to the left with regards to people's health. And I'm, you know, I'm not trying to be, you know, dead against everything and put anybody in jeopardy with their health. I'm not saying to people, don't take the vaccine, don't wear a mask. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm saying we need to think a little bit more about what we're seeing. We need to think a little bit more about how this is affecting humans. We need to think more about how much this pandemic has shut down the environmental groups around the world, especially here on Turtle Island. I think there's a lot of people that you know, are going to be looked at as well, because they're standing up for what they feel and they're thinking, you know, in a different whole light, then, you know, something's wrong with that person. Well, you know, throughout history, people have stood up and stood their ground and had made change. So sometimes I think that you know, we can't jump all on one side. Someone has to jump on the other side of the fence and watch from that other side and say, you know, I'm not seeing what you guys are seeing, and I'm not feeling what you're feeling. So, you know, forgive me for speaking out and saying, I feel that there's something a little fishy going on. I don't know if it's being an empath that I am and being a visionary, if that's what it is, but, you know, I'm a very different individual than most. And, so I'm trying to keep my head in this game. I'm doing a lot of education, and you know, and I do pray for everyone who you know, comes under this great horrible threat of sickness. So I just, you know what, I'm just doing my best to keep it all together myself, and to keep on and doing the work behind the scenes. And hopefully when this passes, and we can get out and be in human contact again, you know, I'm hoping to have most of the finances set up and ready to go to get this camp up and going again, and to create something new for the youth here and other individuals who are interested in getting into the environmental movement.
Perfect. Thank you. That's wonderful. Geraldine, and then we'll kind of, when everyone's had a chance to speak, we'll all come back and explore some of these issues and together, you know, as a discussion group.
Right.
Thanks. Okay, Shavon, so maybe a little bit about your own community experiences and kind of, in a sense, how they've been affected by the pandemic. That would be wonderful.
Okay, I'm from Hollow Water First Nation, and I am from the Bear Clan. I've lived all my life in Hollow Water, and the pandemic, wow. Like, I guess on the ground, like what I am, from my perspective, what I'm seeing in my community is a lot of resilience. I am very proud of our health team. I am very proud of our chief and council with the resources that they have. They are working together to try and be there for our community members. And then at the same time, my role in community, I have been working with health, I've been working with councils, I've been working with grassroots. And so I'm really lucky in terms of community work, because at all levels, I am allowed to participate in a lot of those conversations and dialogue. Is our community perfect in terms of leadership? Probably not. But at the same time, I can say that in terms of this pandemic, people are trying, you know. And I guess for Hollow Water, like one of the things that I have been seeing is different programs, different community initiatives, all working to support one another through it. And I guess my previous role before I started working with the U of M, I did work in health as the health communications officer. And wow, that was crazy. Like, when this pandemic hit, you know, I'm telling you that at the tribal council level, it was a really big scramble. And when I reflect back to the beginning of the pandemic, you know, like a lot of the times the councils and the health programs receive a lot of scrutiny. But again, working within those bureaucracies, I am actually very proud of our communities, because it took a lot of brainstorming. It took a lot of planning. It took a lot of writing. It took a lot of research to try and come up with a plan. And then at the same time, you try align that plan again to the standards, the health regulations, the guidelines. So for me, I stayed on the pandemic team for from March to December. And from there, I made the decision to leave that role, and I was invited to work in my community. At the time, I really didn't know what the next task would be. And I like the fact that you guys mentioned camps, and I respect you, Geraldine, for coming into community to help with the camp that's set up there. But even with that, like, I wish I could provide more comments in respect to that, but I feel that this wouldn't be the platform for me to do that. And I feel that, again, I feel like that's another issue, and I will not go there. But at the same time, I respect you for the help that you're supporting in our community. So this pandemic has been very hard, like in terms of our community. In the beginning, we did do a lot of good work to contain the virus. And now, you know, the numbers are increasing, but at the same time, I do have to give lots of acknowledgement to our health team. You know, on Hollow Water, I think there's a 3-man health team to support a community with this pandemic. And the question I have around that was to the council was, why 3-man team for a pandemic? And what did it go back to? Funding. It had to go back, it went back to funding, it went back to stats, it went back to data. And I was really saddened to hear that. And because I've worked in health before, I knew that our health team, I knew our council is trying their best to work with what they have. So I guess for me, like I used to participate in a lot of activism. And my early years before I became a Kukum, and I had to change that role, not because I wanted to, or not because I felt it was not a role that I should undertake anymore. For me, it had to do with the advice of the elders. We're in a, when we talk about the pandemic, when we talk about camps, when we talk about activism, political activism, like, I like the fact that a lot of the Indigenous people go back to the elders, and that's really important. And there's a lot of roles that I had to take within my lifetime based on advice from elders, community. And the one thing I will say is I sat on the opposition of a mining company in community. That was hard. That was extremely hard. I come from the background of activism and environment, and then all of a sudden transitioning. And I used to get mad being in that role. Why did I have to be there? Why did the elders send me there? Because on one side of it, you face scrutiny, but when you're on in the inside, there's also a certain other type of scrutiny. And I still believe in I believe in our teachings of Indigenous people. I believe in the elders. I believe in the youth. I believe in our environment. I believe in our cultural ways, our traditions, all of that. And I believe in that. And one of the things that I just want to make note is that with this pandemic, the one thing I'm super proud of is our people, our communities. With the lack of resources, the lack of supports, the lack of knowledge, heck, different communities are doing different things. And I am super proud of that. And I wish I had a big wallet. I wish I was a decision maker. I wish I had access to all those resources, because you can almost, I know I would give it to our communities. And I'm sure that's the magic solution. But honestly, I just want to say, like, why I wanted to participate in this conversation is because I'm just proud. I'm super proud. I've been listening at these workshops, and I'm just super proud of our people. And I'm proud of myself. I don't understand some of the roles I get myself into, but I guarantee I walk away with something. And that's how I'd like to leave my talk. And thank you, everybody, especially Steph, for allowing me to be part of the conversation. Miigwech.
Rich, thanks, Shavon. That's amazing. So Sheri, so you've had a couple of speakers before you who, in fact, kind of work in the same community. And so you're our international perspective. And so in an international discussion. And so it's, yeah, if you could talk a little bit about what's taking place in Hawaii or Maui or even nationally, because I know your organization has a national mandate, wherever you want to take it in terms of your community experience around the pandemic.
Thanks, Steph. And before I start, I really wanna thank both Geraldine and Shavon, because just listening to you both, I recognize, like, I get to share space with some pretty amazing peers, colleagues, but also other Indigenous thinkers, which I think maybe that's something the pandemic has risen up for us, is the ability for us to connect as Indigenous people and as Indigenous communities, which, not that it wasn't there before, but I think we really had to kind of almost link arms as that community. And so what I'm hearing this morning is about communities and about our, for you folks, your elders, but for us, our kupuna, that we as Indigenous people, we know what's out there, and we keep trying to fit ourselves into this box without stopping and going, let me just turn around and look what my ancestors did, what history has shown us, that there, all of those things is in not only our DNA, but in our history. And so I think for Native Hawaiians during this pandemic, hearing the same things that Geraldine and Shavon talked about, We have been impacted by this pandemic. I'm sure, like every Indigenous community around the world. And I think this is an opportunity for us to shift our narrative. We have been told for so long that we're, we have huge health disparities. We are the highest number of folks that are incarcerated, that don't complete education, all of these negative narratives. And we've continued to perpetuate it. And others have too. And this pandemic has really made us stop and say, no, our people have always been resilient, no matter what. This is not the first pandemic. This is not the first attempt at erasure of our culture and of our people. But look, we're still here. And I think that's the power of our Indigenous ways and our Indigenous thinking and our Indigenous communities. So here in Hawaii, and I'm going to share screen, and it's very quick. So I'm going to do that. I'm not sure if you guys can see that.
Yep, it's great.
Okay, so for myself, in our organization, Papa'ololokahi, as I mentioned in the beginning, we oversee Native Hawaiian health in Hawaii and across the United States. There's about 600,000, a little less than 600,000 identified Native Hawaiians, and this is based on our census. What we recognized is we needed to come together. We needed to mobilize in a different way than what our funders, policymakers thought. And so we actually came together and created our Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander Hawaii COVID response team. And we call it the 3 R's because we wanted to look at response, recovery, and resiliency. That we recognized that we needed to address it, we needed to work through it, but we also needed to have sustainability moving forward. We are done just kind of taking the resources, dealing with it, and then going, moving on. Our community doesn't work like that. Our communities have very long memories. And so we really needed to recognize that whatever we do, whatever model comes from this, we gotta look at it long term. So we came together, and again, no funding, nothing like that. And we started to bring our partners together across the state. And we actually not only looked at Native Hawaiians, but we said we need to reach out to our Pacific Islander communities as well. And a lot of it was tied to, it's often Asian American Pacific Islander, and Native Hawaiians get kind of removed from that equation. But Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander is actually what the US government looks at in terms of census collection and data collection. We recognize that Native Hawaiians are our unique community in itself and our Pacific Islanders. But we thought we wanted to be able to support each other as our Pacific Islanders had way more impact from COVID. And so we took the game that we know we have to play in order to get resources, in order to have credibility, I guess, not just credibility in our community, but with, the policymakers, if that's, we know that. So we created not only a sub-team of both our Native Hawaiian community and our Pacific Islanders, but we also created working groups looking at testing, tracing, isolation, and vaccinations. And that group has actually morphed as the pandemic has moved on. We look at social support and recovery because, again, there's life after this, and how do we keep that in our vision moving forward? We look at policy because we recognize in order to push change, we have to take a multi-pronged approach. So policy, working that angle, but also reaching into community and being active in their community and being that bridger between the two. Looking at communications, and I put this little picture on the bottom because communications is how we outreach and how we touch our communities and how we engage them and really hear from them what the heck is going on. And that is not a cookie cut approach. Every community is different. Even if it's one person, that's still important. So, starting to move away from this is how it's going to be versus this is how we see it and need it to be. And then finally, looking at data and research, because that's important in moving forward. The one thing that just blows my mind, when we started this, we had like 20 organizations. We currently are well over 60. And again, a range of organizations from large billion-dollar trusts to just what I call the mom and pops, you know, just a small, they're a two-man team working in community. So we have a very wide spectrum and range of people coming together, really with the main purpose of helping our community. One of the things that I wanted to point out is this team was actually created in response to what was happening around us. And we wanted to make sure we weren't recreating the wheel. We wanted to make sure we were being inclusive. So if organizations or other entities were already doing stuff, come to our table. We've got plenty room on our table. You know, we weren't doing this to be exclusive. We also wanted to make sure that we could collect, report accurate data, because oftentimes data is collected on us and it never comes back to help us. And so how do we really drive the conversation and create the data that really we need and we want, and we know that's out there? And then third, we wanted to establish a very clear, unified message and voice. Again, it's not just about having a seat at the table. We do not need to be tokenized or checked in a box, but that when I come to the table and break bread with you, that we're there to have a meaningful relationship. And, you know, really taking stand in that if that's not reciprocated, how about I just go build my own table, right? And I always kind of joke and say this, that, you know, maybe I don't need the invitation to the party. Because, you know, in Indigenous communities, we throw our own really great parties, and maybe people want to come to our party. And so, you know, we can add. That's the other thing about Indigenous people. We can add to our table. We have no problem bringing out, you know, the tools and extending the table so we can add more seats. So really, that was really our thinking, was how do we really embody that and push that forward? And it's not easy. I mean, I think we all recognize as Indigenous communities and partners, that's not how the system works for us and with us. The other thing that really stands out for me in this group or model, whatever people want to call it, is that we recognize our native space and our native truth and values and beliefs. And that's what helps to govern this. 60 organizations is a lot. And that comes with a lot of personalities and a lot of, you know, perspectives. But we use this core values as this is the base of how we behave with each other, what's expected of us. And it's going back to our Indigenous and Native roots. And so that, I think, is very different than what we see in other spaces. And this is what makes being Indigenous very, very different. And if we see that oftentimes our policymakers, our funders don't quite make that connection. And I think it's the connection to time, to space, to everything around you is really one of those intangible pieces. And so it's really hard to describe if you don't have that in your na'au or in your gut. And hearing Geraldine talk about being having the visions, having those things. Yeah, I think sometimes folks outside and sometimes inside our Indigenous communities have a hard time making that connection, because I can't see it, I can't feel it. It just sounds very off. But when you look at all of our history, we have so much mo'olelo, so many stories about things like that, that's supernatural, the ones that just don't make sense. And I think that's part of our resiliency. And so hearing Shavon talk about that resiliency, that, communities coming together, I, I, I never doubted that in our community. I think what this pandemic has done is say, we're done. Here's the line in the sand that I'm drawing, and this is my truth, and this is what it's going to be. And I think more of us are coming to that space. So, that's a little bit of what we're doing here in Hawaii. Not perfect, but I think there's more of us. And so it's not like you're the lone wolf on the range anymore. There's others coming. We're starting to hear our call, I guess, and coming to each other and working together.
Thank you, Sheri. That's amazing. I have a question or two, and so I certainly am going to pursue that. Now, and Maya has a question in the chat box that you might want to look at. But Geraldine and Shavon, is there anything that Sheri said that you wanted to respond to before we kind of close the loop and then and move forward in terms of, and so open it up to either of you in that regard?
Absolutely. I think it's really wonderful that yes, our communities are starting to come together. I think that's something that this pandemic has helped initiate. And I was never so happy to hear when the reserves were blocking the roads and controlling the access to the reserve from different individuals, and then trying to keep communities safe, in the way that they did with those roadblocks, because there's a lot at stake. And I think something Indigenous people have learned is that, there's going to be occasions where, people coming onto the reserves are not entirely sometimes, considerate of others. I think Rosa was a fine example of that when the man came onto the reserve into the store in the gas bar there and spit all over inside the store instead of, if I'm going down, I'm taking some of you with me. And, and they initiated, of course, that roadblock immediately. And I think it's just small little examples of that. I can't imagine how many other stories that we haven't heard about where people are coming onto the reserve to intentionally try and make us sick. It's no different than the smallpox epidemic that wiped out my uncle's tribe, and it's no different than the tuberculosis that they put in the residential schools intentionally. So Indigenous people are I think are getting really caught up on this terrible game that people play against us. I'm not saying everybody's terrible people out there, but there's those few that just seems to think that Indigenous people still don't have any place on our own land, and and are willing to do extreme things towards us. So reserves and communities taking the initiative to lock down, I thought right off the hop was like, great, that's the best thing they could ever do. And I really supported that by not even going home to my own reserve for funerals, and to go see elders that I really desperately want to see out there. But I have to stay away. And that's part of what the pandemic, I think it is very hard on some of us who live in the city and off reserve, that we can't get out to community. We can't be a part of that. And we can't see a lot of our relatives because the majority of my relatives live on reserve. And mostly of them are just the elders that I love to go and see, but I can't. And I think it's important that people understand that there's just so much in play right now. While we're locked down, they're passing policy right now for Crown land here in Manitoba to be sold off to corporations. And I can tell you right now, they're going up there to extract into the Crown lands, just like they passed the bill in Alberta to open up the Crown lands to extraction. So I'm telling people, while they got you looking this way, they're doing this over here. And how many people are aware of what's going on in regards to the policies that the government's pushing through. And I think and I've said it time and time again, this is about land, and this is about water, and this is about our natural resources. Our natural resource fund is extremely high. I think it's in the billions or the trillions now. I think if you follow throughout history, how Canada, how the United States has made their billions and billions of dollars that they have. They made it off the backs of our people. They made it off the backs of our land. They made it off stealing our resources and stealing our water around the country and bottling it up and selling it back to us. Something that's free, that was given to us by Creator. So society is not realizing and seeing all of this corporate BS. And I think it's high time that we really start paying attention to what other corporations are doing. I think right now the governments are allowing these big corporations to do whatever they want. And right now it's a free-for-all for land grab for Crown land up here in Canada. And that's going to continue. And so how are we supposed to stop people from moving into Crown land that's been set aside for Indigenous people? That's where we get a lot of our funding from, is from the Natural Resource Fund of what they've been extracting for all these years from our lands. And I think that we have to pay attention to that. It's very important to pay attention to what's going on with our Crown land that was set aside for our people, for our future, for our children. If we sit back and we allow them to bring corporations to continue extracting, you know what? Our Crown lands will be worthless to our people in the future. And I think that's a really important issue that people have to pay attention to. I can't say it enough. The land. We need to put a stop to them encroaching on our Crown lands that's put aside for our people, and to continue to go in there and extract. And I think it's sneaky, and I think it's underhanded how they're doing this while everybody's in lockdown, that they're pushing these policies through. And I think that's very shady. And I think it's you know what, I don't even know what to say with it. At some point I said, you know what, I'm just so angry about what's going on behind closed doors, behind our backs. And there's no way people can keep up with what's going on. And so I think that's a big part of what we got to educate our Indigenous people about, in regards to how are we going to keep protecting that land that's been set aside. And how long are we going to, what are we going to do to create a larger force to keep an eye on all of these things that are going on in government, and how they're creating these policies to take back what's ours, and for them to steal basically from what's ours. And so I think I think we have to really look at all sides of this. And communities are coming together. Yes, they're doing what's mandated, and that's going to happen. That's the only way that we're going to be able to function. And there's a lot more things coming down the pipeline in regards to a lot of other issues against freedoms and human rights. And so we have to pay close attention to what's being taken away from us, and what's not being given to us. And in regards to what Sheri was saying, that there's issues with that funding, in regards to the money is not always there. I think it was Sheri. I'm sorry if it was what's her name that said that. But I think that we just really have to pay attention to everything that's involved here. I don't sit in a box myself. I'm always outside the box, because I think it's important for people to be on the outside, to always to look in and have different opinions. And like I said, I think it's got a lot to do that I'm very connected to ancestors. I'm very spiritually connected to the land. I carry a rock in my bundle because that rock spoke with me. It spoke to me, that rock, and it was very important, that rock, and it showed me something on that rock. And I think that we have to remember that as Indigenous people, that connection to the land, that connection to the medicine spoke to me as well. And I don't think people can really grasp and understand what that means for someone like me to be hearing these things and being that connected. And why I'm very adamant about protecting the land and the water and the environment and our medicines. Because it's just something that we're doing that I feel that a lot of governments around the world are not liking. You see it everywhere. Indigenous people are standing up for their land, and they're putting up, with a lot of hate, a lot of violence towards them in all different ways, whether it's verbal or just violence, period. And you see that going on around the world. And I think that, we're going to just keep seeing more of it occur as this goes on. And because I think there's a lot of people that are upset too, and think a little bit on my side. So my concerns mostly the land.
Yeah, no, thanks. And the land is really important. And I think it's really important to recognize that, governments and industry together, are taking advantage, as you say, of the pandemic and us being distracted to further their own agendas. And I think that's widely accepted. Now, that said, kind of just thinking from the other side and building, I know all of you kind of have experience in terms of, in your case, Geraldine, actually sitting in a camp, kind of an international camp in a sense, and obviously with you, Shavon, in terms of your cross-community work that you do, and obviously Sheri, in terms of this amazing model that you put together with all these different organizations, and so kind of focusing on Shavon and then ending with Sheri, because we've only got kind of 11 minutes left.
Okay.
Is just some thoughts in terms of can we together, in terms of Indigenous people and allies, is there a new normal in terms of working together that comes out of this, so that we don't have to go back to the, kind of to the divide and conquered kind of approach that governments and industry have taken, in a sense, building on these kinds of partnership-based models and working together in terms of networking and learning kind of post-pandemic. Is there a new normal that can take place in terms of moving forward? And so, first of all, Shavon, and then Sheri, if you can speak to that.
Well, first off, I want to thank Geraldine and Sheri. And Sheri, I am so moved by your presentation as well, because I am a Kukum, but I also feel I'm very young too. And so what I have so much thoughts in respect to what Geraldine said and what Sheri had shared. But I really want to move over to what Sheri's presentation, because that provides me comfort, knowing that other communities are trying to find ways to work together through different partnerships. And it's just beautiful to see that picture you showed us with all the organizations. Now that is something that I think it provides me hope. And I think that I would like to touch base with you after this, because I think there's stuff to be shared and stuff to be learned. And for me, Steph and Geraldine and Sheri in the group, I've always been a firm believer in working together with non-Indigenous and Indigenous. I know it's hard. We have a bleak past. But at the same time, through all my interactions, all my experiences, the one thing I will say is that I am proud of the partnerships that are forming. And things are slow to change, but I'm optimistic, and I always try look at the good. I don't know why. I think I'm more of an idealist. So I'm very, very honored with the presentations and just to be part of it. So I want to close, and I say miigwech to Geraldine and Sheri and of course Steph, and I want to hear more. So I'll shush. Miigwech.
Thank you, Shavon. And so, Sheri, yeah, in terms of this idea of building partnerships and maybe even, across, national borders and international partnerships, like what are some of the learning insights that you come from your work in terms of moving forward?
Well, I think my question will also maybe answer Maya's question in the chat.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to give a visual, because I really think as Indigenous communities, we all have our art, whether it's a woven mat, whether it's, tapestry, whatever it is. But for Hawaiians, for Native Hawaiians, we have our lauhala mats, right? They're woven, they're kind of all together. And I think through colonization, whatever you want to call it, those mats were unwoven, and we became siloed, whether it was health, education, housing, right? we were siloed in our spaces. And part of it was the divide and conquer concept, right? If you don't know what you're doing there, we can do it here. And we really never talked because we trusted we were working in our areas. We got plenty to do. And I think as Indigenous community, we're starting to kind of say, well, let's reweave that mat. Let's recognize, right? Because we hear all these buzzwords of social determinants of health and all of this stuff. It's like, that's what we've been doing. Somebody just branded some wonderful words together and that's what we got. And so really, how do we reweave that? It's always this reignite, re-envision, whatever it is, because we have it in us. So I think that's the first thing, is visually kind of understanding what we had, what happened to us, and where we can go. You know, when I look at communities, it's about trust, 100% trust. It doesn't mean because I'm Native Hawaiian that I can just come in and that's it. No way. I gotta come in and I gotta listen. I gotta understand my lane. And the biggest thing in our community, I gotta have action. I cannot just be moving my mouth and making all these statements and doing all this stuff. I gotta have action, and action not just being like the Tasmanian devil action, right? Of just creating dust. There has to be true intention and good intention to what I'm trying to do with our communities. You know, because at least for myself, once that trust is broken, you're not going to get it. And as I said in the beginning, Indigenous communities have memory, and they're going to know. They're going to remember that you were not pono, you were not good in what you did with them. And so I definitely believe trust is huge. I think, you know, do I think this has created a new norm? Unfortunately, and maybe I don't want to be the wet blanket here, but I don't think so. Because what has changed, and I think what will continue, is the eye opening and staying eye opened for our communities, for our Indigenous communities. Unfortunately, I do see that the other end, the policymakers, the fund, you know, the resource holders, what they believe they're the resource holders, that's not going to continue. They're going to revert. They're going to fall back to what's comfortable. And that's the thing, is they weren't created to be nimble and flexible and think in those lines. They were created as a system, as a machine, right? And that's what it is. And so they're going to go back to what has worked for them. And so I think the difference is that as communities, where do we come together and go, okay, if I'm going to go down this path, maybe I need to send Shavon this way. I need to send Geraldine this way. And I need to be much more thoughtful and planful in how I strategize, right? And recognize this isn't going to be a quick fix. Their memory is not longstanding like ours. And so I think, you know, we're working in very different ponds, right? So how it is in ours is not what it is there. And so we need to recognize that, but we need to hold true to ourselves in doing it the way our community needs to be. So I think for myself, and I think many of us in our Indigenous communities recognize that we can't change the system. We can influence the decisions and the actions that they take, but it's going to take more than us to change the system. The system is going to have to recognize that it needs to change. And it's not going to be one voice or two voices, which is what we see often, right? It's one person pushing. They're going to burn out. And that's the challenge. So that's the $1 million question, Steph, is there is no silver bullet pill, unfortunately. And our elders, our kupuna, they've been doing this for generations. They're tired, right? So it's like you have to be for us a squid. You have to have 10 tentacles to reach in every nook and cranny. And that's the thing is, we don't have that, right? One person can't be it all. So I think it's all these little pieces coming together like a puzzle, a 10,000 piece puzzle. And so how do we find each other to actually start making impact? But I hope I answered Maya's question that for community and meaningful relationships, trust, knowing your lane, understanding your lane, listening. Like there's times that I just sit in meetings and I just listen, and that's what you do, and then action, and being truthful. If I cannot produce what they want as a community, I need to tell them that. And it's not for lack of trying, it's just this is what the landscape is. So what can we bite off that's reasonable and real, that we actually feel like we've made impact? So not that we cannot dream and have that bigger vision. Of course we can, but let's hit the ones we can make, and then keep growing. So I think that's what it is. And knowing that, I often get asked like, well, what does Pacific Islanders want? I don't know. I'm not a Pacific Island. I mean, I'm a Native Hawaiian. And so again, understanding who you are, being in that truth and saying, you need to go talk to them. And just like as Native Hawaiians, I'm not the only Native Hawaiian, that you need to have more of us talking. It's not one person's decision just because I fit into the box that you've created. And I think it's okay to say that, that's what it is. And I think sometimes we get fearful of saying that. So, thank you everyone for the opportunity.
Thank you all. That's it's remarkable, the kind of the shared experience around oppression and colonialism, and at the same time, kind of this desire to reach out and to network and to build around action and to create a new future, recognizing, of course, as you say, Sheri, that there's going to be lots of pushback and there's going to be kind of resistance to the more powerful that these alliances become or these partnerships become, but it's a hopeful message. So thank you. Thank you everyone for participating in this session. And yes, Shavon, reach out to Sheri and to Geraldine already if you don't know one another. And hopefully, with gatherings like this, the conversation can also move forward and the mutual support around all of these issues. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Can I just quick say thank you to Sheri, thank you to Shavon, thank you to you, Steph. I really appreciate. I really heard everything everybody's saying, and it's incredibly inspiring. I just want to say thank you very much, everyone.
Okay.
We'll open up.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Stay safe, everyone.
Yeah!